Alright, so for this assignment, what we're going to be doing is a combination of skills and tools. Similar to the last one we did with the still match, but with this one we're doing a video. Okay, so what we need to do is be able to bring this in. Now there's a folder that has several different HDR and that type of setup. This no extras one is not for this assignment. It's just for extra stuff if you wanted just to track or play around with some of the other stuff that we're going to be doing. But any other one, parking lot, field 2, church, building with stairs, brick, basketball court, or alley, all of these would be acceptable. And they all have HDRs in them. So here's 4 HDRs. And then depending on how many videos I shot, there'll be different movies. Okay. So the basketball one has 1 movie, the brick footage has 3 movies, building with stairs has 3 movies, and then it also has some NEFs in here, and these are just snapshots I took. Okay, these are not for the assignment, these are just for extra stuff in case you wanted to use them for something else. These video ones are the ones you're going to pick from, so you're just going to grab one of the videos, look through them, try to find a good one, and we're not going to use the whole video. These videos this is 30 seconds long, okay? You want to find a good chunk, at least 10 seconds of footage in here. Alright, so let's say I'm going to use this one. I like this little walk-up area here where I'm kind of showing this center area. And you want to think about what could you add to this? You know, what would you want to use to incorporate this? Okay, so the way the camera's moving, it looks like we start back here, and I'm kind of following something essentially. Like that. Alright, here's another example. I'm going to keep that one open because I'm going to use it. This parking lot one, I believe it was this one. You can see based on the way that the camera moves that I'm pretending that there's something way out here, and then here it is, I'm looking at it, and then it comes in and maybe the goal was maybe like it hits the car and the car explodes or something, okay? And then I did it a couple times. So you don't want to use the whole thing. You just want to find a good section of footage, okay? So something around 10 seconds is sufficient, all right? Anything less than 5 seconds, you're really kind of making more work for yourself because it's going to be harder to do any tracking and make sure everything looks right. All right, so I'm going to take this one, which is building with stairs. I believe it was that first one. I'm just going to drop it in After Effects. Okay, and I'm just going to make a new comp. So just drag this onto the new comp button. Okay, this is not the same one. This is a different one. Similar type thing. And I could go with this as well. But I like the other one just because I have sky in it. This one doesn't have any sky in that one. Church. There we go. There we go. So see how I have a little bit of sky back here? We want to do a replacement on the sky as well. And let me switch this to seconds. And let me figure out how to do that. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to start off back here. Let's say at 7 seconds or so. Put a little marker. And then we'll go up a bit. There we go. About 20 seconds. Bring my marker. And I'm just going to go to trim comp to work area. And I'm also just going to make sure, I want to play it again just to make sure that what I have is acceptable. I don't want to like end my video on like a big quick movement. I want to make sure that it looks like it could work. Yeah, that works. Okay. Now, if at any point I decided I wanted to retime this or I wanted to edit it and whatever else, I would do that definitely inside After Effects before I go into Nuke and all those other programs here. Okay. So now that I have that, I'm going to export it as a movie. And this is going to be a TIFF sequence. And this will go to my desktop. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it the Putting It All Together. There we go. Okay, so this is going to be my footage. So I'll make another folder here called footage. No distortion. I'll make another folder, distortion. Okay, just like our individual image, there's going to be some distortion on this most likely. So I'm just going to drop it in here. Call it church. And it's fine there. Go to the render settings here. Okay, just making sure everything's good. And render. And it's stopping here. There it goes. Just thinking. Okay. So now I have that. So I'm going to save this out of After Effects. Just as my project. And putting it all together. Source video edit. And close After Effects. Okay. Now I'm going to go into Nuke. And I'm going to read in that piece of footage. So that was home, desktop, putting it all together, footage, distortion, church. Okay, now we're going to see too that this actually starts at frame 176. Okay, and the reason for that is just where I exported out of After Effects, that's where it came. So I'm just going to add a, not retime, a time offset node. And I'm just going to say subtract 176. Okay, now I'll set this to input, and you'll see that my first frame is actually 0. Okay, well I want this to be 175, so my first frame is actually 1. There we go. Okay, so this is input, time offset is 175, whammo bammo, we're good. There it is. Okay, so then what I can do from here is I want to just check this and make sure that we are indeed have no distortion. So I'm going to go to a frame where I can see some pretty strong lines, like that. Okay, if you look at the door, there's some pretty strong lines right there that I could use to line up my little lens distortion thing. Let me swap this over here. And let's do the little split vertically. Drop properties down there. There we go. Okay, so you can see it better in the video. Alright, so now let's go into the time after the time offset, and we'll add a lens distortion node. Okay, and we're going to go to line analysis, and you could do image analysis too, and that will, like, you know, do it for you basically, but I think we're better off doing the line and just doing it ourselves. So we click drawing mode on, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to click at least 3 points along where we have a straight line. And then we right click, and that puts the line there. Okay, so let's do that again. So I know there's a line here that should be straight. And then I right click, and then it adds a line. So I'm going to do a number of these, and the more that I add, as long as they're all accurate, the better job it can do to kind of solve this thing. I'll also go the other way and go here. There. Now, even though these aren't technically touching, they should be in a straight line. Okay. This is so like rocky, I wouldn't want to do that. Go, let's drop some on the other side. This thing I don't think is going to be very straight, but this piece of sidewalk here will be. And even this guy coming here is pretty straight. There we go. Okay, so that should be plenty of lines there. So now that we have that, we'll turn drawing mode off. And we'll say analyze lines. And then now we're undistorted. So here is our distorted image. There's undistorted. Okay, so you can see that amount of distortion there. Okay, so now that we have this undistorted, then what we can do is take this and we can write this out. So we'll go to our folder, we'll go to our home, desktop, putting it all together, footage, no distortion, church dot pound dot TIF. I like to keep it as one thing. I don't like to jump around between pings and whatever else and whatever else. So I'm keep my first one as TIFF, so I'm going to keep everything as TIFFs. So we'll do a render. And then we'll come back when this is all done, rendering out. Alright, so now we're done. Now the reason we did this lens distortion on here is because when we go in here and start modeling 3D stuff, we can't have it distorted at all. Because if we do, then it's just going to be that much harder to kind of line things up. Okay, so now let's save our new project. And put it all together, no distortion. Let's go up a folder, and we'll just save it right here. Okay, so now I'm just going to close Nuke. Alright, now I've opened up PF Track. Okay, this is PF Track here. It's a little bit squished on my screen, but we'll deal with it. It's one of those programs where you kind of get into it when you need it, do what you need to do, and then you get out of it. Okay, so we're going to go over here to where it says project, and we're going to create a project. I'm going to give it a name. So it's going to be called church. Pick the folder it's going to go into. Putting it all together. Choose. Whammo bammo. And then I hit confirm up here. Okay, so that creates that project. So I can go back to my project if I need to, and I can edit certain things inside here. Okay, church, and I can edit things if I need to. So I'm going to go back to this create parameter, and the import panel. No, that's not right. Sorry. I'm going to go back to the create one. And what we have to do is we have to find our footage. So I'm going to go to that was right, I just had this extra window here. I'm going to go to here where it says C drive, and I'm going to go find my footage. And I wish it would just jump me to it, but it doesn't jump me to it. And putting it all together. Footage. No distortion. And here's my footage. Okay, so I'm going to drag this into this window here. And I should have something there. Alright, so for some reason it did not like my TIFFs. And so I just went back in a nuke and just re-rendered it out as pings. Save, sure. And the pings want to come in. Okay? No idea why. I have used TIFF before. And if you look at my PF track thing, it says tag image file format loaded. So I don't know. Alright, so if TIFF doesn't work for you, then you can use ping, or you could just use ping to begin with. Alright, so here's my footage, and my display here is kind of cramped. That's mainly because I'm working at just a different resolution for this video. Alright, So what we want to do is we want to track this information. All right, so we're going to first go into this area down here where it says camera presets, and we're going to type in some information. So if we go back to our folder that has our footage in it, source church, there's a little text file inside here. There it is. It has the camera info inside this, and this is the stuff that we want to type in so that our stuff is just a bit more accurate. Okay, so we're using Nikon D7000. That's the kind of camera. Here's the size of that sensor. So 23.6 by 15.6 is the numbers we need. So I'm going to come over here and change this to custom. Okay, so PFTrack's just going to figure out the other one for us. So as long as we put in 23.6, it's going to just type that in. Even though it's not the same number, it figures it out. Okay. So now what we're going to do is the new PFTrack, which is 2013, is a node-based PFTrack. So basically what this means is that we have our read in here, and we have to tell it all the stuff we want it to do. So I'm going to go to the Create tab now, and I'm just going to do an auto track. Okay, so here's the auto track. Now if we had something like something we need to mask out in here, because something's moving. Right now there's nothing moving inside my scene except for my camera. But pretending that, you know, this rail was moving and bouncing around and whatever else, I'd have to go to the Mask tab, and I could do a Bezier. There we go. And then I could just go up a little bit, and then grab my Bezier. And move it over here. And what this is going to do is remove it from being tracked. Okay, just like we talked about when we were doing the hand on the computer screen. Okay, so basically this is just saying do not use this thing, do not use this thing to track. So I'm just going to delete that, and somewhere's my delete button. Delete. There you go. So a lot of these buttons you have to click once to just do it, and then click delete to actually do the delete. There we go. So let's go back to parameters, and we're going to put in as much information as we can inside here. Okay, so current group, camera, it's fine. Presets, we don't have any presets. Channel, red, green, blue. So if I come up here to my video and I hit R, G, and B, you can see that pretty much the contrast is the same in all of them. Okay, so there's not going to be any benefit of picking red, green, or blue individually to track. So I'm just going to leave all those on. The candidate number is how many tracks I want it to put out here. I'm going to put this number up. I'm going to put it up to, let's say, 200. Okay. Target number. Let's put that up to. We'll put it up. Leave it at 40 for now. We may have to increase it. Okay. The window size. If you remember from when we did regular pixel tracking, there was a little window that was here, and then there was a bigger window. And this window size is what is doing that. So if I go to show windows, and I come up here, you can see the size of that window that it's going to be using. Okay, so if I made this bigger, let's say I made it 50, you can see that that's now a bit bigger. Okay, we also have the search range, which we could increase. Let's put it at 100 and 100 just so you can see the difference. Show windows again. Now you see that that's much bigger. Okay, so realistically, a lot of these numbers are going to be okay. Okay, so this guy at 50, let's lower that down to, no, I think 50 is probably good. We'll leave this at 50, 36, 36. Pick threshold is fine. Minimum length, I'm going to take this up to 10, maybe even 15. This is how many frames a track has to be in the field in order for it to work. Okay, and then the failure threshold, I'm going to lower this down to 0.1. Okay, so this should give us a pretty decent track. I can also hit preview and just see how many points are coming out on the screen. Turn show windows off. and by changing some of these things like, the candidate number, you see I get more points. The more points, typically, the more accurate. Oops. Like if you only have 5 points here, you can see you're not going to get a whole lot of stuff going on. So 200 is pretty good, and then from here it'll pick, which ones it wants, and then go from there. Okay, so that should be good. All right. So now that's there. So I'm just going to hit auto track. Oops, sorry. One more thing. Feature scale, I want to set to large. There we go. And you see that it changed where those are placed. So if I go to small, go to large. Okay. So with large, it's kind of hitting like the more major items here. All right, that's the best one it's going to do. And then we're also going to go for search mode, better accuracy, deformation taken care of, consistency. You can also type in what kind of camera you have. All of these are free cameras that I've given you. Okay, but sometimes you'll get just rotation or no movement, or not none, but free camera. That's good. Back spread. All right, that should be good. All right, so let's go to auto track. And what it's going to do is it's going to run through all of our frames and track all of those individual points. Once it's done tracking those points, it's going to zip through backwards and kind of make sure that all the tracks are good. Okay, so I'm not going to bore you with watching mine. I'll just let mine go, and then when it's done, we'll come back and take care of the next step. Okay, so now that it's done, you can see here are the tracking points that it figured out. Now I'd like to have some more over here. So if I need to, I can come back in, maybe change my window size down, maybe change this to small, see what we get, and then go from there. Okay. Okay, so what we can do now is we're going to go into the errors section, and I'm going to go to trim. So I click on this trim button, and what I can do is drag down this thing. So all the stuff that's in here is the error, the amount of error. So you see how, you don't want any error. So anything that's like above 0.5, which is about here, is probably really, really bad. Okay, most of our stuff is actually pretty far down here in the 0.2, 0.3 area. I'm just going to drag this to about 0.2, and what this is going to do is eliminate anything with an error over 0.2. Okay, now if I drag this all the way down like that, you see how I lose a lot of my points. I don't want to lose any of my points, or many of my points. So 0.2 seems to be a good number. Okay, now, like I said, if we decide we want more, we can always come back, do an auto track, fix it up, do some more stuff. All right, so now we'll come back here to create, and we're going to do a solve, camera solve. There it is. And if these things don't get connected, okay, so it comes in just like that, you just connect the dots together, just like in Nuke. Okay, so now we're going to go to this camera solve, and let me make sure everything else is good here. Yes, yes, yes. Solve all. So now it's just going to go through and take all that tracking information that we gave it, and it's going to create a 3D camera that we can bring into Maya or into Nuke or into After Effects or any of the other programs. And we went through the tracking in Nuke before, and the tracking in Nuke is good, but we don't have as many options as we do in here. Okay, there's a lot of stuff we can do. Failed to solve frames 318 to 324. Okay, so it's failed to solve frames 318 to 324, which is just this end section here. And essentially what happened is it just doesn't have enough information. So let's just ignore that for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scrub through. Okay, now this plane that's right here is essentially my ground. So as I watch this, I'm trying to make sure that it makes sense. Actually, there's my ground way over there. So it looks like this is not a good solve. This is just all over the place. Okay, and this happens. So what we're going to do is delete the solver. Delete, delete. Yes. I'm going to go back to my auto track. And I'm going to adjust some of my settings. Okay, so maybe I'll take my window size down a little bit, maybe to 40. I'll do small feature scale. We'll try that and see. Let's do preview. Yeah. Okay, so let's try that again. So I'm going to go back and do auto track. And I'm going to say remove existing or extend the tracks. I'm going to just say remove. I'm going to start it from scratch again. Okay. And this is just the process of doing this. So I'm not, again, let it go through, track the stuff, and we'll be back after this. So here it is going back through at the end of this. This is a while later, like 15 minutes later. More tracks you have, obviously the longer it's going to take to track the stuff. So we just let it go through, and you can see it's going backwards. It's just kind of double checking some of these tracks. And again, we're just going to do the same process. We're going to go to the error area, add a solver, solve it, and see what we get. And if this is a, this is a, let's say, Hollywood production or a paid production, and you need to make sure this thing is locked down tight. Sometimes it takes even doing manual tracking, basically what we did with the still match, but doing it over and over and over again for every single frame. I'm going to close this. Alright, so a few minutes later, it's finally done. Okay, so now we have obviously a lot more tracking points in here. Let's go to the errors thing, and it should be trim. Okay, the trim is still in the same spot. And the cool thing is that we could always pull this up too if we realize, you know what, maybe we need to increase, let a couple more points in there, we could do that too. Okay, so I'm actually going to pull this all the way up and see just where we're at. Okay, so there's a couple of stragglers here, so maybe I won't pull it all the way to 0.2, but just above it. Okay, so I'll go back to the create, go back to camera solver, and go to solve all. Now it's going to go through, try to solve all of those. Based on where those points are and how those points move, it's going to try to solve that camera movement. So hopefully it'll have better luck this time than it did last time. Alright, so this time it did not come back with an error. Okay, here's our ground plane. So now what we're going to do is watch the ground and see if it makes sense. Okay, right there, looks like it's a little wobbly. I think we still have a little bit, it's a bit off. If I look at the the grid here, and we watch one of these lines, you can see it kind of wobbles around. But what I can do is, I'm going to click on one of these points, I'm going to say set origin. Okay, so it sets that as the origin, and now I'm going to watch it and see where we're at. It's definitely a little wonky right here. I can see if I watch the points back here that they're really jittery. So what I can do is I can come down to my focal length, and I can type some values in here. Like I know that the focal length for this was 27 based on that image or that text file. I'm going to go with some medium smoothness in the translation and the rotation. And I'm going to hit refine all. Okay, so that will refine the camera movements based on what we've set here. Okay, so now we'll take another look at it. Let me reset the origin to that point. It still moves away from it. It's right at the end, basically past 250. Past 250 looks like it's no good. Everything else up to that point is good. Okay, so instead of going through and just trying to correct this even more, again, I can play with errors. Here's another trim. So we can start trimming off some of these error solves. And then again, refining. And sometimes that will, again, just help kind of correct some of the stuff that we're dealing with. Still looks like we're moving too far away at 250. So what I believe is happening, if I go back to my auto track, is that we just don't have enough data after this point. You see back here, there's a lot more points going on. And up here, there's not that many. Okay. So what I can do is go back to my parameters, go back to my minimum length, maybe lower my minimum length to 5. Maybe take my failure threshold. I may have had these settings maybe a little bit too refined that it was doing that. Okay, so I can basically just go back and again retrack. I've lowered some of my settings so it shouldn't take as long. I'm just going to hit auto track, remove the tracks, and then I'll go through this process again. Now it might take a couple times to do it, but eventually you'll get a nice clean track based on these settings that we kind of tweak and tweak and tweak. Okay, so we'll wait again until I come back, and then when I come back the next time, I will have a good solve. Alright, so after tweaking some of the settings and messing around with my auto track here, basically I went back and did the default auto track and then just set this to large. I could have set that to better accuracy too. Maybe I would have got a even more accurate solve. I'll try that again after. And then letting it go through the auto track, then going to my error report, trimming off my stuff here, going to my camera solve, and then doing the solve all. And I don't believe I trimmed anything here. No, everything's good there. Okay, so after that, it seems to be working. Okay, at least good enough for right now. I can always come back and tweak this and then, you know, update it down the line. So what we have here is I have my solver. I can just delete that export. And there's other stuff that we can do. We could throw in a test object. And if I just go to cow, import, add to scene. There we go. And I could grab the cow and place him at one of my objects here. Display, coordinate system, there it is, interaction mode. Place at selected feature. So now I just click on one of these features and you see the cow just jumps to that feature. Okay, so basically what I can do is just kind of set them, let's say, on the step here. Okay, then I just play through and I can make sure that he stays on that step. If he doesn't stay on the step, then I know that, you know, something's gone wrong. And I could even have him left-handed Y up. Okay, just too far back to see his detail. There you go, you can kind of see him a little bit better there when I put him on the step. Okay, so for the most part it looks like everything's working pretty good. He's staying where we need him to stay, and that's always a good sign of a good track. If we see any tracks that are kind of floating and not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then, you know, that's a sign that something else is going on that we need to adjust. Okay. So there we go. So the cow is just like an extra thing you could throw in. There's also a cow head, mushroom, tall marker, and a thumbtack. So I could add that to the scene also, and then put a thumbtack right there. Okay, and it just gives me, again, just a way to kind of test the tracker to see if it works. I could also take my grid and shrink it down so it's, you know, not visible. That way I can see the ground, see where it's interacting. Oh, I was seeing what these red and blue things were. That's just my mushroom. Alright, so yeah, so it looks like it's good. I can delete this test object. I don't really need it there. And then I'm going to go to export scene or export. Okay, now inside here, this is where we get to take it to wherever we want. So with the format, you can see all the different things you can take it to. There's After Effects, here's Apple Motion, 3ds Max, Autodesk FBX, Maya, Softimage, here's Nuke down here, Shake, Side Effects Houdini. Okay, lots of different places you can take this, which is one of the great advantages of doing something in an external tracker like the one we're using. You'll notice there's two Mayas. One has nothing next to it over here, and the other one has ZXY. Basically, this is not the one we want. This is the one we want. Okay. Click where you're going to put it. I'm going to put it right now in my Putting It All Together folder. And then my scene scale, I'm going to put to 5. And then I'm going to say export. Okay. So now I'm going to come into Maya. And I'm going to make a new project. Oops. Project window. And I'm going to put it inside the Putting It All Together folder. Let's call this church. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is go into my Putting It All Together folder. I'm going to cut that file. And then inside of the scenes here, I'm going to paste that file. Okay, so now when I go to open, I can just open up that church image. Okay, now it's not going to load in our video, so I switch to the camera. You'll see we don't have the video, so I'm going to click on this button here to select the camera, go in the attribute editor, and then load in that camera. Okay, so I just have to go back to my footage, go back to no distortion, grab my ping sequence, and then I have to make sure I say use image sequence in here. That way it brings in the whole sequence just like it did in PF Track. And also for the display mode, changes to RGB. There we go. So now if I hit play, you'll see we have a similar scene to what we had inside of PF Track. Okay. And if I were to create an object inside Maya, use V and snap it to any one of these points. Let's make it flatter for now. And look at it, you can see that that box looks like it's on the ground. Okay, there's no shadows, there's no lighting, or if there was reflections, there'd be reflections, but we don't have any of that yet. Okay, so what we need to do now is, if I go scrub through real quick, you can see it, is we need to create, set this thing up correctly. Because if I created a ground plane, there it is. I'll take my divisions down. And we just kind of move around. You see that the ground plane doesn't look like it's flat at all. Okay, even if I took this and snapped it to one of these points, you can see the ground is actually rising up here and hitting that. Okay, so here's a quick way we can kind of line this up. As I switch back to perspective, and here are all of these points. Now if you look at them, you should get, let me see if I can switch to a different mode and see it easier. I think that mode's good. Let me just go to wireframe. If you look at the points, you should be able to see basically a structure of where you were at. So right here, all these points that are on the this flatter area, you can see even though they're not perfectly flat, there is a general movement to it, a general shape to this movement. Okay, and that there is where the ground should be. There might be a little bit where there's a step over here. So let me switch back to my other view. Yeah, you can see that some of these are on the step. So I'm just going to control and deselect the ones that are on the step. Okay, so now we have all of those. And if we look at the front view, you can see they're not perfectly in a straight line, but if I took an average of where these were, I'd probably find where the ground is. Same thing with the top view. It's not the top view, sorry, the right view. I'd be able to get that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and using these ones, I'm going to hide the other ones. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and marquee the other ones and just throw them on a layer. There we go. Okay, so that's basically my ground. What I can do is just take this and rotate my camera and my whole group to line that up with this ground plane. That's more stuff back distance. All right. So if I go to the outliner, you'll see that from PF Track, I got this folder or this group. Here's my camera, and then here's all my locators. So if I grab this group And let me put this back to where it was. Grab the group. And I rotate it. In all the directions to get it, you know, as evenly distributed as I can. Like, go to the front view and take a look. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's go to the other view. Alright, let's just see how this is going to look. Okay, so basically this is, I'm just lining up my camera and stuff with this ground plane. Now it might still need to be, if I grab it, it might still need to be like rotated, you know, kind of like that. But for the most part, I think we should be pretty close. And look at that, we're pretty close. Alright, so if I take this plane and I shrink it down some, okay, it's still a little bit off, that's fine. The ground here was a little bit hilly, so it's not going to be perfectly flat. Okay, and I'm going to even use my split view like we did in the other one. So I could have my camera 2 here, and this right there. And I'm going to group it again. Now that I have the 1 in position, I just hit Control-G to grab the group of the camera in that. And I'm just going to rotate. Okay, and I could also move this way. And I'm just lining this line up right here. Alright, that looks pretty close. Okay, I'm going to try to adjust it just a tiny bit more. Let me take this edge here. I'm just going to pull this edge out to where I know that that should approximately hit. Okay, let me grab my groups again. So I just pick one and hit the up arrow a bunch of times. Okay, now, you know, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but we just want to get it pretty close. Alright, so there it is in this little spot here. So now what should happen is as I go through my timeline, this should stay in the same spot relative to where the picture is. So if I switch to frame 80, you see that that's still relatively in the same spot. Okay, now I get to 324, you'll see that's actually on top of it. Maybe this just needs to be moved down a bit, and maybe over a little bit. Okay, now I can go through and adjust these points, but I have to be careful because if I just grab it and throw this here, and I grab this one and throw it there, it's about where it would line up. You'll see that later on, it really doesn't match up. Okay, so you just have to be careful. I typically don't like to move things willy-nilly. I'll grab this and I'll slide it basically along the ground. That's what I'm doing here and there. Okay, that way I'm doing it one axis only. I'm not going up with any of these. Alright, so that looks sufficient there. Even if it comes up on the step, I can have other pieces of geometry that would take care of that. Okay, I can even slide this over. There we go, pretty good. Alright, so now let's make this a bit bigger. And let's save this as. Let's call it Church 01. Okay, now the background here is going to be replaced. Okay, I don't really care for the stuff that's back here. Like from this building over here, all the way down here, around there. I don't want that. So I'm going to replace that with something else inside of Nuke. So I'm just going to ignore that. My focus of this area is to have something happening right around here. Okay, and you can see the shadows, you can see the direction of my light. So, you know, I want to keep that in mind as I do this stuff, that I, you know, if I have an object here, it's going to have a shadow, or it's not going to have a shadow because we're not really going to see it. Once it reaches the sunlight, then it'll have a shadow. Over here we probably have like ambient occlusion or something, but that's it. Okay. Now this could be as complex or as simple as you want it, but let's pretend that we wanted these the doors on here too. So I would grab a plane. I would take the divisions off. Let me turn this back on. Okay, now I can see the locator right there. So I'm just going to snap this to there, rotate it. Okay, I'm just going to scale it up and adjust it. And if you think back to the keying assignment, this is essentially what we're doing is the keying assignment. Okay, now as I hit play, you'll see that that plane sticks pretty much where the door is. Okay, now I can animate some of these things, but it's best to kind of, to keep it as locked in as you can. Okay, so if I need to, I can just nudge that back a little bit. I think that's what it needed. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now the only reason I would have this piece of geometry here is if something is going to be going on right there. Okay. If nothing's going to be happening over here and all my focus is right there, I don't need to worry about that stuff. All right. My guy is going to interact with it, or I'm not bouncing any shadows or anything, then I don't need to worry about it. I'll even duplicate that over there and just have 2 doors if I needed to. Okay. Once you get the basic layout of this, it becomes much easier. Even taking a cube, and I can pretty much guess where the stairs are going to be, right? Because they would be this back here. The stairs would be reaching over here. And scale this across. Scale it that way. And it's a bit hard to see what's happening there, so let me go through. Yeah, went too far. Okay, now it looks like it's actually like bending outward. It's not just like a straight set of stairs. So then I'd want to take this and pull it till it gets lined up with that edge. The same thing on this side. Okay, so now as I go through, you can see that now that stair looks like it's staying there. Actually, it looks like it fell a little bit. Let me turn this on. Oops. Okay, it might even be on a little bit of an angle, so let me just rotate it some. I'm going to grab the edge, pull it down. There we go. It's working much better now. Okay. And like I said, we can always tweak this stuff as we go along. Even my camera, if I realized, hey, at the end, the camera's really not lining up with where I think it should. Because right here, this edge is going right, in line with the base of this. Okay, and then at the end of it, you see it's not. And it should be. So what I can do is figure out where this is happening. So it looks like it's good right about there. Okay, 182. And then gradually it just gets further and further away from it. Okay, so let's go to 182. I'm going to grab my group. I'm going to call this match cam group. And what I'm going to do is just set a key. So I'm going to say set a key on this. I'm going to go up to the end of this. I'm just going to go back to my split view and just nudge my camera over until I'm back being lined up with that spot. Okay, and set another key. So now if we look at this, you'll see that I stay locked in there much nicer. Okay, still a little bit off here, no big deal. Just come in, give it a little pull, set another key. So we have most of the work done by our tracker, and then we just have this little finessing work that we're doing just to tidy it up some. Okay, now that I've tidied that, then I can go and say, oops, this is not supposed to be out that far. Okay, there we go. So I'm not going to need that right now, or I'll leave the doors. But that step I'd probably want to redo and make it a little bit nicer. Okay, so let's save. And then the next step of this is going to be a bit tricky, so I'm going to stop the video here. If you need to take a break, take a break. And then come back and we'll finish that up. Alright, this is the setup that we're going to be creating for our shader. This is another file I did, a basketball court. Just so you can see what that one looks like. Putting it together. Alright, so you can see how I have a refractive object, a reflective object, and this ball here. You can ignore this thing. Okay, and the scene's a little bit dark because I am using a linear workflow. Alright, so this is the setup we're going to get so that we can get all this kind of stuff. Because right now, if I were to not group my stuff together, I don't know why it always does that. Probably because I don't have very much room. There we go. If I switch to this one and I just added an object in here, and then I rendered it, you'll see that it doesn't look like that object's actually in the scene. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll go to our render settings, and we're going to set up linear workflow first. So we'll enable color management, sRGB linear. We'll be using OpenEXR files, so we'll just go down to I'm in Maya software. Change this to Mental Ray. Mental Ray is not loaded, so we'll go to our plugin manager under Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. And I will load Maya to Mental Ray. There it is. And now I can go to Image Format and choose OpenEXR. Okay, and single frame's fine for now. Camera 2 is fine. 1280. We'll change that later if we need to. All right, so that's good there. Okay, so now we'll go to our render views. We click the one with the blue. We go to Display, Color Management, change our image color profile from sRGB to linear. So top is linear, bottom is sRGB. Okay, so now we're going to do the setup for this. So we're going to go to the Hypershade. We're going to load in the Mental Ray production shaders. I already have them loaded, so you can Google that if you don't remember it, or look at the last lecture. We just have to run that command that's down here. If you remember, we just typed in enable Mental Ray production shaders, and we found that script. All right, there's right there. So we just copy that, went into Maya, ran it down here, boom, and then they showed up. Or we had to reboot, then they showed up. All right, so what we're going to do, this is the setup again, is we need to bring in our maps that we have. Okay, so that's the first thing we're going to do is bring in our maps. So we're going to bring in a ray switch, a MIP ray switch. Okay, that's going to be our ray switch that we're going to connect everything to. And then we're also going to bring in spherical, that's what I got to find. A MIB lookup spherical. Okay, we're going to need 2 of these. Okay, this guy here will be called FG. This guy here will be called reflection. Alright, so we're going to bring these in. So I'm just going to go over here and click on the little texture for FG. Go down to the folder. And then it's not inside here, it's actually going to be inside of our source files. Okay, so if I go to my desktop and I find where I put the church footage, I want to grab all 4 of those HDRs. Okay, HDR. And I'm just going to paste them inside of my source images. There we go. Okay, so this is the FG we're doing, so we're going to load in the small FG. There it is. And then we're going to go to reflection, click the map, click the folder, and load in the small reflection. Okay, so now we have those connected. So now we can connect these to this ray switch. Okay, so if we look at this, okay, the one we used before, just so you can see the one before, was this, not really that yet. There it is, MIP ray switch environment. We use this one, which is just 2 nodes. Okay, and the problem with this one is that it's too simple. It doesn't allow us to really maximize our rendering speed. So we have the ray switch here. I'm just going to middle drag final gather onto final gather. Okay, so you middle drag final gather onto final gather. We're going to middle drag reflection onto environment, reflection on refraction, reflection on reflection, and reflection on transparent. Okay. Now we'll have this other one that's I. We're going to load in this MIB color alpha. Okay, so I added a MIB color alpha, so we're just going to middle drag that onto I. And this is just going to take care of the alpha channel. Okay, so just take this factor down to 0, and there we go. All right. Okay, I'm going to need a MIP camera map. Okay, and this is where my file is going to go. So if I open up a file, because this essentially is our environment stuff, and then this is the background plate of what it's going to be projected on. Even though we see it here, we're not going to use that as our final setup. So in this MIP camera map, I'm just going to middle drag file into this and go to other. Okay, and you have to go to other because we have to tell it we're doing the out color to the map, and then close. Okay, so now that we have this ray switch with the color alpha, the FG, and the reflection, we have our file, which we haven't loaded yet. Let's load that. Footage, no distortion, the ping. We're going to take the filter off. Make sure we say use image sequence. Good. Good. Okay, now we're going to go to our camera tab up here and bring down camera 1. Okay, not this camera 1, that's our image plane. If you hover your mouse over it, you'll see that. Okay, so camera 1, if we scroll down to the mental ray section, has this environment shader. That's where this ray switch goes. So I middle drag that onto the environment shader word. I see that this is changed to an arrow, so that's good. And then I have to connect this onto that MIP matte shadow. Okay, so I'm going to grab my ground plane. I'm going to assign, and in this case you can actually assign a Lambert. You don't need to assign the MIP matte shadow. It'll work just fine this way too. Okay, so I'm going to get to where we have this Lambert 2, and then open up the mental ray section and just create that MIP matte shadow. MIP matte shadow. There we go. And let me grab Lambert 2 again. Click this back button. I'm going to middle drag my MIP matte shadow onto material. Middle drag it onto shadow. Come on. And middle drag it onto photon. And that's it for that. Okay. Now I'm going to middle drag my MIP camera map onto background and onto indirect. Okay. So let's say catch indirect, catch reflections, close this, close this. Let's save this as version 2. Let's render and hope we don't crash. Okay, now it does look like we are catching some reflections. It does look odd. We see that there's a definite color difference here in the 2 images. That's kind of weird, but let's take a look at why it's doing that. Okay, number 1 reason, if we go back to the hypershade, and we go to our camera. I'm going to now double click on that image plane, and I'm going to turn it off just by changing the display mode to none. Now we don't have the image plane back here because we don't need it. That's part of it. The other part is under the utilities where we have these reflection and final gather. I just click this double arrow. I need to make sure that this reflection that's coming in is not using the default input profile, it's using a linear profile. And the same thing with this guy, he should be using a linear profile as well. So now let's check this out again and see. Okay, our sidewalk looks good, but you'll see the stuff out here does not look good. It actually looks like it's off a bit. It's actually what's happening is let's jump to, I don't have Nuke open still. 700 other programs open. Well, let's open Nuke, and I can show you. And I'll open up these two small ones right here. Okay, so I dropped those in, and if we look at this one, this is our HDR that we're using for our reflection map. This is the HDR we're using for our final gather. And the reason we're using this one for final gather is because we're basically like blending all the stuff in together. And that'll help correct a lot of those, like if you ever used final gather and had a million points all over the place. That helps fix some of that. Okay, so what's happening with this is, let's add in a sphere, is it puts it on the sphere like this, and our rendering that we're doing is kind of like at, yeah, it's like at this angle back here like this. Okay, what's happening is the sphere is rotated and showing us this part. Alright, so what I need to do is I need to rotate this 90 degrees to the left. So now the way I do that is I have to go in here and type in 90 degrees to radians. Okay, so 1.57. So I come back to Maya. I go to my reflection. See, this rotate here is not degrees. If I type in 90, it's not a degree thing. It's going to freak out. It's radians. So I type in 1.57, which is, come on, this number here. And then we go back to Maya. I'll make sure my final gather is also set to 1.57. I'll take a little snapshot. I can also go under Options, Test Resolution, and take this down to 25%. While I'm doing these little tests, it's not going to hurt to do that. Okay, so I went 90 degrees the wrong direction, not a big deal. I just make this negative 1.57. Or, I should have done something. Let's go back to here, and then let's type in 270 degrees, 4.71. And this part is really, it's trial and error. It should have worked better than that. So let's go to, let's take this to 0.5. We'll see where 0.5 gets us, and we'll just go from there. Sometimes you can do it just like I was trying to do it, or just kind of tweaking it. Okay, 0.25. See if that gets us a little bit closer. Nope, we're further away. So I need to go back to 0.75. So it might have even been just a 45-degree rotation that we were looking at. 0.785. Let's go here and just type in 0.785. And the same thing for final gather. Okay. And it doesn't have to be exact. We're focused mainly on our area that we're looking at here, not necessarily the stuff that's out there. Okay, I really don't care about the stuff that's out here. My stuff in here will get all the stuff that it needs. Okay, so that should be good. Good. All right, so now this guy is going to get a Mia. So let's add a Mia to him. I'll add this as Chrome. And let me make this bigger so we can actually see this thing. I'm also going to close some of my windows I have open. All right, there we go. So now you can see, here's the ball on the ground, and we're getting the reflection from the church area. It's odd that these are just hanging out here. I must have moved something. Oh, no, never mind. That's right. That's where the church would be. Okay, so that's the setup. Okay, now, it's hard to see the rest of the stuff, so what I like to do is just go to perspective view, and I just duplicate this, and I'll rotate it 90 degrees. I'll shoot it back here. That way this whole thing is in my view, and what that will do is, when I render now, it's going to show me the entire thing. It's going to show me the entire plate, and then from there I can see where things are lining up and how things are looking overall. And again, let me take this down lower. Options, test resolution, 75%. You don't want these renderings to take long, especially if you're trying to tweak stuff and get it to look the way you want it to look. There we go. Okay, now obviously we can adjust the reflection on this guy, just like we did in the other one, just clicking on that, and then pulling down that reflective color a bit, taking the glossiness down more so it's not so glossy. We can also turn on, we'll need a multiple outputs later. Let's turn that on. And I'm going to check my alpha channel. If I click here, this is what I should see, is I should see my object with that alpha channel, or with that reflection. Okay, these over here, if I need another MIP matte shadow, then again I'll just assign a Lambert to it. I'll go to my hypershade. I need to make another MIP matte shadow. So there's Lambert 3, which is the door. Click the back button, and I'm just middle dragging this on a material, onto shadow, onto photon, and then under the MIP matte shadow, I'm going to the background, and I'm dropping in my MIP camera map onto background, and my MIP camera map onto indirect. And I can take my reflection to an appropriate level there. Okay, now I'm also going to turn on, in my render settings, turn on Final Gather and set this to 50, 0.5, and 50. Now what we're going to see now is the doors will be invisible. There they are, invisible. And then we have this, so we can see the reflection of that into here. The reflection on this still needs to be adjusted. It's way too reflective for the ground. Okay. And this is still going way too slow, so I'm just going to change my test resolution to 50%, and then we'll go from there. Alright, so I'm going to duplicate this and shove it over here into the sunlight. Okay. Now remember, I still have the image plane on this, so if I go to my camera attribute editor right here, go to the image plane, I can just turn it back on. RGB, go into wireframe, there it is, and I'm just going to move this ball into the sunlight. I know I just have a ball right there, so I'm just going to render that area. Okay, and what we're going to see is that it's not going to look like it's really in this area because we don't have any shadows going on. I don't know why it stopped right there. Holy cow, let's render the whole thing, I guess. There we go. So you can see we don't have shadows happening inside this area. So what I need to do is I need to create just a piece of geometry over there. Okay, so I can just duplicate this. I'm going to put the pivot down here by using DV, D and V, and just using the middle mouse button. There's a little locator right there, so I'm just going to hold down V and snap it over there. And then scale this up. Just adjust this. Test it out. Could probably use a little nudge backwards a little bit more. Maybe a little bit nudge in Z. All right, there we go. And then in perspective view, I'm just going to create a directional light. Okay, and I'm going to try to match up the angle that we'll be seeing this thing at. Okay, and then also this stuff here, this is the rest of the building. I need to make sure that the rest of this is kind of blocked off too. So I'm just going to grab this edge and extrude it. And extrude it again. You can see how I can basically like build this entire shape. Pretty quickly. I only need to be really, exact in this area. There we go. Okay, I need to make sure this is blocking the rest of the light coming into the scene. I'm just going to scale this up and push it in. There we go. Now I should have is some light kind of pulling in through here. I want to make sure it doesn't happen on this side, so I'm also just going to drop in maybe just a big plane back here like that. Okay, I'm just covering my bases so the light doesn't fall into this area. Because it's a directional light, it might do that. Okay, also this plane here, I need to make sure that under render stats, it doesn't cast shadows. Alright, so now, oops, I wanted to grab the light just to make sure shadows were on. Ray trace shadows are on, good. Let's go to our render view. And what we're going to have now, you'll see that there's now a shadow here. So then we can play the game of rotating this light more to get the angle correct. There we go. So now we're a little bit more lined up with where we need to be. And then I can take that shadow and just lighten it. So I'm grabbing the light, just adjusting the shadow color. Okay, still a little bit lighter. And it's actually a bit softer too. If you see, it's a little bit soft here. So I can take this light angle up to maybe like 0.15. There we go. Now we're getting something much closer to what the surrounding shadow is looking like. I think we still need to go up a little bit on the angle. Maybe a little bit more. Our scene's pretty big, so maybe we'll take this to 2. Yeah, it's a bit better. Okay, so we should be good with that. Maybe I'll darken it a hair more. I'll adjust my reflection on the ground a bit more. There we go. So now we're getting something that looks nice, and it looks like it's kind of, in the scene, lined up with it the way it should be. Okay. So now it's just a matter of, now that we have this, let me save. Now that we have this, it's just a matter of kind of going in here and just creating all the stuff that we need to create, making all the stuff that we would want to put inside the scene. If I wanted a car here, if I wanted a person walking or doing push-ups or I don't know what. Find something that you'd want to put in this area, and then our next step is going to be to render it out. Okay, and once we have it, you'll see it's basically lined up with that stage with the alpha channel, so we should be pretty good on doing that. Alright, I just need to make sure that that some of these other objects that are back here are not casting any shadows. Okay, I definitely don't need my ground casting shadows. And I can grab a bunch of these and go to my attribute spreadsheet, and under render I can say cast shadows off. So it looks like in my alpha we got a little bit of shadow casting on there. Okay, it's still there. It might be the indirect. So we'll tweak that in another one. Okay. So now that we have the setup here, now we can do whatever. I can make this ball in perspective view. I'm just gonna grab this, animate some keyframes. There we go. So now if I go to my camera, you'll see there's the ball. And that ball is just going to roll down the street. Okay, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can use extra resources. You don't have to be, spend hours modeling stuff. You can go to Creative Crash, download some Maya models, and put those in your scene. They have some pretty cool free ones that, here's a car. I don't know if it's free, but it's a car. They're for sale. Let's go to section, free downloads, 3D models, and then you can pick from here what you want to bring in. So here is a vehicle. That's not free. Even though I typed in free, apparently free doesn't mean anything. So we go to price least expensive. Maybe we'll get a different lineup. Let's go to display. Oops. List. Yeah, here's some free cars. There we go. So there are some free models on here we can download. And you can drop it into your scene and just have something there. Here's a forklift. Let me log in. I'm going to log in and put it in my scene. I'll be right back. Alright, so I found this other one didn't download right. I found this Nissan car, dropped it into my scene, and there it is. And if you watch, I had to change the color of it just because the color wasn't, working correctly. So that's obviously something that I could add to my scene to make it, look a little bit fancier than just like a plain old thing. Okay. So next we'll worry about the rendering of this. Keep in mind, other stuff we want to do to this. We don't simply want to just render it here and then be good with it. We want to do some post stuff inside Nuke, like I said, changing out that background or other stuff too. Okay. So this is only part of that. Think of this as also, maybe you find some good keying footage. We've been through this before. Smoke. Find a good video of smoke that you want to key out and add to the scene. Maybe you wanted to have, a factory back here and put a picture of a factory, and you have other stuff going on. It's something that we can do as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and we'll move on to the next one.